Hello everyone, my name is Sanjana Karkera and in this module we'll be learning about Fiber to Fabric Part 2 presentation made by Ritu Karthik. Let's begin. Table of contents. We have Part 1 as Life History of Silk Moth, Part 2 Rearing of Silkworms, Part 3 Processing of Silk. Introduction. Silk fibers are also animal fibers. Silkworms spin the silk fibers. Sericulture is the rearing of silkworms for obtaining silk. Sericulture or culture of silkworms is a very old occupation in India. India produces plenty of silk on a commercial scale. So let's begin with part 1, Life History of a Silk Moth. Discovery of silk. Short story time. The exact time of discovery of silk is still unknown. According to an old Chinese legend, the Empress Silangji was asked by the Emperor Huangdi to find the cause of the damaged leaves of the mulberry trees growing in their garden. The Empress found white worms eating up mulberry leaves. She also noticed that they were spinning shiny cocoons around them. Accidentally, a cocoon dropped into her cup of tea and a tangle of delicate threads separated from the cocoon. Thus began the era of silk. Silk industry started in China and was kept a closely guarded secret for hundreds of years. Later on, traders and travelers introduced silk to other countries. The route they traveled in is still called as the Silk Route. The timeline process. Step 1. The female silk moth lays eggs, from which hatch larvae which are called caterpillars or silkworms. Step 2. When caterpillar is ready to enter the next stage of its life history called pupa, the worm weaves a net to hold itself. Then it swings its head from side to side in the form of the figure of 8. Step 3. During these movements of the head, the caterpillar secretes fiber made of a protein which hardens on exposure to air and becomes silk fiber. Step 4. The caterpillar completely covers itself by silk fibers and turns into pupa. This covering is known as cocoon. It's activity time. What are we going to do? Cut out pictures of the stages of the life history of the silk moth and paste them on pieces of cardboard or chart paper. Jumble them. Now try and arrange the stages in the correct sequence in a cyclic form. Whoever does it fastest wins. You may also describe the life history in your own words. Write it down in your scrapbook. Here's the life cycle of a silk moth. All 5 stages shown in the picture. The egg, then becomes the larva, then becomes the pupa, then becomes a developing moth, and is finally an adult. More about silk. Development of the pupa into moth continues inside the cocoon. The silk yarn thread is obtained from the cocoon of the silk moth. There are many silk moths which look very different from one another, and the silk yarn they yield is different in texture. Coarse, smooth, shiny, etc. Most common silk moth is the mulberry silk moth. The silk fiber from the cocoon of this moth is soft, lustrous, and elastic, and can be dyed into beautiful colors. Let's do some project work. What are we going to do? Collect pieces of silk cloth of various types and paste them in your scrapbook. You can find them in a tailor's shop among the heap of waste cut pieces. Take help of your mother, aunt or teacher and identify the types of silk such as mulberry silk, tussar silk, eri silk, muga silk, etc. Compare the texture of these silks with that of the artificial silk pieces, which contain synthetic fibers. Try and collect pictures of different moths whose caterpillars provide the various types of silk. Fact check. In India, women are significantly involved in various kinds of industries related to silk production. These are rearing silkworms, reeling of silk from cocoons and processing of raw silk into fabrics. By their enterprise, they contribute to the nation's economy. China leads the world in silk production. India also ranks among the leading silk producing countries. Here we are at the part 2 of this module, rearing of silkworms. Rearing of silkworms. A female silk moth lays hundreds of eggs at a time. The eggs are stored carefully on strips of cloth or paper and sold to silkworm farmers. The farmers keep eggs under hygienic conditions and under suitable conditions of temperature and humidity. The eggs are warmed to a suitable temperature for the larvae to hatch from eggs. This is done when the mulberry trees bear a fresh crop of leaves. The larvae, called caterpillars or silkworms, eat day and night and increase enormously in size. The larvae are kept in clean bamboo trays along with freshly cropped mulberry leaves. After 25 to 30 days, the caterpillars stop eating, move to a tiny chamber of bamboo in the tray to spin cocoons. The caterpillar or silkworm spins the cocoon inside which develops the silk moth. Part 3. Processing the silk. A pile of cocoons is used for obtaining silk fibers. The cocoons are kept under the sun or boiled or exposed to steam. The silk fibers separate out. The process of taking out threads from the cocoon for use as silk is called reeling of the silk. The reeling process. Reeling is done in special machines, which unwind the threads or fibers of silk from the cocoon. Silk fibers are then spun into silk threads, which are woven into silk cloth by weavers. So, a recap of this whole module. First, silk comes from silkworms and wool is obtained from sheep, goat, and yak. Hence, silk and wool are animal fibers. In India, most of the sheep are reared from getting wool. Sheep hair is sheared off from the body, scoured, sorted, dried, dyed, spun, and woven to yield wool. The hairs of camel, llama, and alpaca are also processed to yield wool. Silkworms are caterpillars of silk moth. During their life cycle, the worms spin cocoons of silk fibers. Silk fibers are made of protein. Silk fibers from cocoons are separated out and reeled into silk threads. Weavers weave silk threads into silk moth. That's all for this topic. Thank you for watching.